Yeah, so maybe we'll just jump straight in because we're talking about it already. So, are you born and raised in Gainesville? Is that where you were from originally,
No,
or?
no, I was born and raised in Chicago, of all
Ah, okay,
places. I came down here in 77. I was in Gainesville for about 8 years,
okay.
so 7 years, and then I moved to Daytona for 10 years. And in 95, I married a lady who lived here, and it seemed to make the most sense to come back. So I've been back ever since. So that's 27 years so that I've been
Wow,
in this last stretch, and 35 total. So I've been when I got in Gainesville in 77, it was a much different town than it is now. It's much
right.
smaller. When Tom lived here, it was only 27,000 or so, and it wasn't a whole lot bigger than that when I moved here. Uh, but it's just grown exponentially in the last 30 years, 40 years. But
It's crazy you
um,
think, and you think about that size of a town, 27,000 people, to still have that rich musical legacy that it has is it's pretty unusual for a small town like that to develop so many really talented musicians, I think.
there was two key reasons why it happened. One of which there was a fellow that his dad started a music store, and then he took it over, Buster Lipham.
Okay.
And Buster would a kid would come into his shop and start eyeing that guitar, and he'd go, "Son, you have any like grass cutting jobs or something?" "Oh yeah, yeah, I've got a regular income, blah blah blah." "Well, you got $10? You can put $10 on it?" "Oh yeah, yeah, I can put $10." "Can you make payments of $5 a week?" "Yeah, yeah." And so then, Buster would kind of set it up with him, and then he would call the parents and go, "Is this
Right.
okay?" And so literally he basically, put all these instruments out in the community. So that was one thing. And of course, the Beatles were so affected so many different people in
Yeah.
terms of wanting to learn how to play. And then what happened was the fraternities and the sororities, the college, they those kids wanted to hear live music, and it takes a lot of time and effort to have a band, play all the stuff that's current and all that. Whereas the college kids were pretty busy being college kids.
Yeah.
And so the high school kids in the community started forming bands, and Tom was one of them. And so it was kind of like their Hamburg, if you compare it to the
Right.
Beatles.
Right.
They got to play and play and play and play to where they start getting pretty darn good, and then went out to California and got a record contract.
Yeah.
Um, but you're talking about Stephen Stills was here,
Right.
Don Felder and Stephen Stills in the same band, right? The Mondi Quartet, right? Um, Bernie Ledden was here,
Yeah.
Tom Ledden was here. Um, you have um, the Bo Diddley, was
Right.
living in
Right.
the area and affecting folks as well. And then you have Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, all five of them. So you quite have quite a rock and roll Hall of Fame, group. It
Yeah.
comes out of this tiny little town. It's just amazing.
And it's
Um,
it's funny because it feels like that. And again, I mean, no, us old guys when we start talking about music, it does feel like that's lost a little bit somehow. That there aren't venues for young kids to just go and play and suck for a little while, but learn how to do it and learn that craft of actually playing live shows and learning their instruments. It feels like that's missing a little bit because we don't tend to see as many of them coming through. And of course, that's going to be industry pressure as well. But it seems like Gainesville has managed to avoid that more or less because looking through sort of the list of festivals you have in Gainesville every year, there seems to still be a really vibrant local indie music scene there. So is that accurate or
there is, and I think it's growing. To be honest with you, it's kind of went underground to some degree,
right?
and a lot of college bands came up. It's the ones that didn't have time to do it in the 60s or 70s. Now they're doing it. And
Right.
we've had some great bands come out of Gainesville since the 80s. Sister Hazel was one, and Big White Undies was another, Less Than Jake. There was bands that didn't quite hit the super big time, but certainly made their mark in music. But so that's been going on. And then
Right.
I think there's been a 20 years of a punk rock festival called
Yeah.
The Fest that, I mean, now these guys are coming there, are coming in their suits,
Right.
but it's just they don't look quite as wild as they did when they first came, I'm sure. But yeah, it's something that a number of people in town are like, we want to get back to being a music center,
Right.
and trying to, Heartwood is certainly one of the big steps forward to, because we were so dependent upon public facilities, and that doesn't always
Right.
work out well. And so Heartwood being a private facility, so it's pretty nice.
And so is that something then? Obviously, like you said, back in the 70s and into the 80s, and then maybe it sort of drops off a little bit, but then it's resurgent. Is music sort of, because there are music towns, right? There are towns where music is just part of their DNA, and it's how people sort of identify. That's one of the things they say about art. Well, we've got a really good music. Has that always been a Gainesville thing?
Well, certainly since the 60s, 70s.
Okay.
I don't know about before. There was a few people that came out. BB King, the last couple of years of his life was in Gainesville. He has a number of relatives that lived here. And
Wow.
so it's not the only, but your comment about music, back in the 60s, most one of the things that people try to do is have dances for kids,
Yeah.
right? And the 70s as well, so that they wouldn't get in trouble, the
Right.
10 to 15-year-olds. Of course they were going to get in trouble, uh but and we don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, just, and there was a tremendous interest in rock music among the youth in the 70s. Witnessed the gigantic festivals,
Yeah.
Woodstock, and on and on. Atlanta had, 100,000, and I mean, it was one after another for a while. And and that type of interest hasn't come back. I mean, it's gone away. It's different. I don't know whether it's better or worse,
Yeah.
but it's more permeated into life now, right? You
Yeah,
don't
for
go
sure.
anywhere without hearing music in the elevator, and music, in the supermarket, and music in the waiting room of the, whatever office you're in or whatever. It's everywhere. And you can, with the phones and Spotify or Apple Music, you can hear every song that's ever been recorded
Right.
at any moment. So I think the sound systems in the cars have gotten so much better, right? So you're listening to music. Music has just permeated our life.
Yeah.
It wasn't like that in the 60s. It was like, what's this new toy?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
music, this is cool. Now it's like, I don't mean to say old hat, but it's gone into it's now become part of our everything, part of our lives.
Yeah, it's just it's in a different cultural space, right? Like it doesn't mean quite the same thing maybe as it did when it wasn't ubiquitous and it wasn't sort of everyone, when you could listen to any track, which is great. I mean, being able to just go back and listen to Bo Diddley or go back into, Sister Rosetta Tharpe and learn about all that stuff through YouTube or through Spotify or whatever is fantastic for a music fan. But you
Right.
don't get that same. I mean, I remember I grew up with vinyl, and cassettes came in my lifetime. But when you get that piece of plastic and you get it home and you put it on the turntable, it's just a viscerally different experience hearing that first. Hearing Black Dog for the first time, or hearing Refugee for the first time, or something like that. It impacts you. It hits you harder, I think, when there's something there because it's not all the time. Like you said, you're not hearing it constantly on commercials. You're not hearing it constantly in the malls, all those kinds of things. So it just means a little bit more, I think, to us old folks who sort of grew up with it being a little more sparse. I think, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, there was another factor, and we had this Vietnam War going on in the 60s and 70s, early 70s. And there were a lot of the young folks were really upset about it,
Yeah,
because they were drafting people whether you wanted to go or not. And it wasn't, and see, it's really important for folks to understand what was going on back then, because it was a police action, right?
yeah,
They didn't allow our troops to shoot first. It wasn't a war. I mean, we call it a war, but it
yeah,
wasn't a war. And so they're basically had their hands tied behind their back going over, and people are shooting at them, right?
yeah,
So it was like, once you found that out, I was like, no, I don't want to be part of that.
Of course, of course.
And so you had this sense of all the youth was kind of like on one side and these old people were on the other side. And then you have the music that came in, and it
Yeah.
was music that was for us. And really at no time in history was there ever anything like that before, right?
And I
Music for the young people,
and
right?
I don't
Yeah.
really think since maybe grunge would be the only thing really that's somewhat comparable, right? Punk, I guess, maybe, but not to the same extent where it was this huge cultural explosion with, John Baez and Hendrix and Dylan, of course, coming through and just changing the whole world of music completely.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah. And then the Beatles,
yeah.
back the Beatles. Oh my gosh. Well, it's like Tom said, he goes, he really, I mean, he met Elvis and that
Yeah.
just changed his life, right? I mean, I don't even know if he got to shake his hand, but got to nod his head and be in his presence.
Yeah.
And he was so impressed with that he was like, okay, I want to. He got a guitar and he started learning songs and all that stuff. But when he saw the Beatles, is when he went, oh, I can do that, because he
Yeah.
knew he was going to grow up to be Elvis.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And it's like, no, he wasn't going to do that. That wasn't going to happen. But he could become one of the Beatles, so to speak. He could
Yeah.
get his, some other guys and get together a band, and sure enough, he did. But that was the Beatles were just a monstrous, and something that I came across recently about how the Beatles were so strong in their optimism and in their happiness, right?
Right.
Their songs were so powerful.
Yeah.
Especially the early albums were so powerful in their exuberance. And then and that no band had ever done that before, right?
Yeah.
The kind of exuberance, right? And I read that John Lennon said that Hamburg was really, really important to them, because he says we would have never become the band that we became without Hamburg. And he said, because we would have been so much softer and laid back. He goes, but Hamburg, the Germans wanted you to play loud,
Right. Yeah.
fast,
Yeah.
right? So it's like, oh, I guess we got to play it that way. So that's how they developed their sound. Oh, it's just the way it happened, but very cool.
Well, and again, just inspired so many people, like you said, to pick up a guitar and think, yeah, we should just get some of our friends together and play, because and it definitely said, oh, it'll impress the girls and it'll be, is it something for us to do? And the parents probably maybe didn't love the music they were playing all the time, but certainly that they weren't going out getting into trouble if they're just sitting in the garage playing. Well, that's a good thing because we know where they are, right?
Right.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome. Yeah, so we could probably talk about the history of music for 6 or 7 hours here, but I want to loop back quickly. So, growing up in Chicago, then, what was home life like? What was music like in your home growing up?
Music, when I was 10, well, when I was 9, maybe, right around there. I'm in a bathroom in my house. I had not got into, I mean, kids songs or something. It was
Yeah,
nothing. Music wasn't that a big deal at all. And I have WLS radio, which is big radio, AM radio station. And I had gotten that year I'd gotten that AM radio.
right.
It's a big deal, right? It's
Yeah.
like a Walkman for folks like you, or even maybe a phone, nowadays. But
Hey, I had AM radio, dude. I grew up because you could get European countries on AM radio. In FM was
right,
all local, but we get stuff from like Luxembourg and France, and you couldn't understand any of it. It was like, this is so cool. Yeah,
yeah, it
yeah,
is. And so and She Loves You comes on. Now, this is September of 1963.
right.
They had not really been put out on the radio stations. And remember, I don't know if you remember, their first big song was I Want to Hold Your Hand.
Yeah,
But WLS got She Loves You. And I'm like, oh my God,
yeah,
what is this?
yeah,
It just is like a bolt of lightning. It
yeah.
came out of the sky. It's like, holy smokes. And so then I, got a guitar and I started taking lessons. I was not very good. I didn't go terribly far. And the parents didn't think I practiced enough, so they cut
Yeah.
off lessons. And so I didn't pursue being a musician beyond that. But I always and then I was getting Beatles records until like Rubber Soul, and then I really got into sports for a few years, and so music kind of went to the wayside until I got to college, and
Right.
then college and the extracurricular things that you would take when you're in college, and the music just combined to really make me a lover of music for the rest of my life. So, I mean, some of the early music that I really got into was like Elton John, Madman Across the Water, and Led
Yeah.
Zeppelin 4, and all I mean, Yes, Fragile, on and on and on. I mean,
Yeah.
just amazing, amazing acts that continue to be wonderful albums even to this day, you know.
It's
So
funny. It's funny you talk about that. I always talk about this with people because, maybe it's more so with rock and roll, maybe it isn't. But when that first sort of visceral connection to it, it's like, oh my god, this is music for me. This is my music. It's not my parents' music. It's not, and you can tell because it just you get your body gets excited. You know what I mean?
yeah,
And so it was for me. It was the first time like my dad's huge headphones and sitting in front of our record player with a big box of vinyl and taking out this weird vinyl record with a photo of what looked like a tramp on the front and put it on. And again, the first time Black Dog kicks into your head, and then
oh yeah,
Plant's vocal comes in. It's like, oh my god, this I'm never going to be the same again. My
right.
life is that's this is my music now. This is what I'm going to be into for the rest of my life.
I,
So
I still hear the because I first started listening to it on an 8-track player, so I still know where the 8-track clicks were right in the middle of some songs.
yeah. Yeah, and
Yeah,
that's the thing that kids don't get these days too, right? It's like your vinyl record skipped in a certain place and it had a pop in a certain place that no one else's did. So that's your record. And when you heard the song, sometimes you thought, oh yeah, I forgot that I don't have that word on my song because it skips over it. So
yeah.
totally
So
different.
yeah, the so you got into it when you were when? How
Oh god,
old?
I was young. Yeah, so my dad's a musician. My dad was a guitarist, and he was in bands, like just a sort of a hobbyist. He was a working class fella. But I would have been listening to Zeppelin, the Kinks, the Who, the Beatles, Queen from the age of sort of 5 or 6, really. And being a music obsessive, just getting those big headphones on, and just sit for hours in front of the record player and just record after record after record. And Earth, Wind and Fire too, and Rod Stewart and Rossini and Beethoven and Mozart. It was a very musical household, and I had access to all of that, right? So it was a good musical upbringing for me.
That's great. I mean, some of the two of the great albums to me is Dark Side of the Moon and Led Zeppelin 4 for sure. And
Yeah.
and also Jimi Hendrix, Electric Ladyland.
Oh man,
I
the
was
stuff on
like,
that album, it's still never been topped. I mean, some of the stuff that he did with the guitar, there's people who are proficient, but they never quite have the same groove and the same soul that Jimmy did, right?
if you ever get a chance to watch the documentary they did on the making of Electric Ladyland,
Okay.
I recommend it. I actually I couldn't get through it because my mind was just blown. Because
Yeah.
what he would do is, like some of those songs you'd hear like it was like, wow, is he playing at a little bar or something? There's people talking and all this stuff. Well, what it was is everyone he would meet during the day, he'd go, man, I'm recording tonight. Come down to my studio. Hey, did you ever play any instruments in high school? Yeah, I played the sax. Okay, bring it down. And
Wow.
literally, literally, he literally just brought people in, and they'd either sit there and listen, or they'd be playing,
Yeah.
So I mean, it's like,
So
yeah.
when did you discover Tom's music then? So you like you said sort of 77, I think you said you moved back down to Gainesville. So you were kind of around then in Gainesville at the time that that first album comes out, doesn't do anything, and then obviously in 77 John Scott thankfully finds that record in the bottom of my cupboard, and then it
Right.
starts getting played. What are your first memories of Tom's music?
My first memories of Tom's music was that I was living in Gainesville in the early 80s, and I started hearing about Tom Petty. It's like, oh, and I would hear some of his songs, but I didn't have any connection other than, he came from this town, but I
Yeah.
didn't really know. And I actually remember I was working in 83 for this music, it kind of like, it was a low power TV station that was going to play music videos.
Right.
And we actually played around with using one of breakdown, the guitar solo for like a TV like when they put up the name of the station and they have a little music on for a few seconds. Well,
Yeah.
that was what it was going to be. And I was like, wow, that's really good. And then I was listening to, and that was the first time I actually listened to his first album. And I'm going, boy, he's got a couple country songs in here. It's like,
Yeah.
I wasn't into country at all. So I was like, oh, yeah, I didn't buy it. And but then I when I came back in 95, at a certain point, I became more and more aware of him. And when he did the 30th anniversary concert and appeared in Gainesville, I got tickets for that. And so that was the first time I saw him, was
Okay.
2006. I mean, certainly I had respect for him. It's a great band. It's interesting. What I'm seeing now with people that are older, that the bands that they got into when they first got into music, they never let go.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Those are in, right? And so now it's like to squeeze a new artist in there is hard because you've already got your favorites, right? So Tom was always one of those that was like, wasn't my one, wasn't in that first group. So
Yeah.
it was like, all right, yeah, I like them. And I remember buying we had Full Moon Fever as one of our albums, and that was just amazing. What an amazing album. And so anyway, so we went to this 30th anniversary concert. It was incredible. They did, I mean, they play songs at that concert on Tom Petty radio all the time. I mean, it's almost the top shelf concert,
Yeah.
I mean, that we have access to, right? I mean,
Was that the one on the documentary? Was that the Live from Gatorville? Was it
it
that
was
show?
included with the running down a dream
Yeah.
documentary,
Oh
the
man,
live
that
concert.
show is just unbelievable. Like
No, it's
unbelievable.
unbelievable, right? That's
Yeah.
the first time I saw him live.
Wow.
And then I saw him in 2014. And that was terrific. It it was actually I got a chance to meet Mike Campbell in when he was touring with Fleetwood Mac after Tom passed away, right?
Yeah.
And he was doing a deal where you pay some money and you got to meet him, right? So I paid some money and my wife and I got to meet him. And my question to him was, why didn't you guys jam more? Right? Why did you get into? And a perfect example, one of my favorite Tom Petty songs is Melinda.
Yep.
It's like 15 minutes, and they kill
Yep.
in that song. And there's a couple others where they ended up getting into jams. And it's like, boy, I just felt like they could have been even bigger with some of their jamming. I mean,
Yep.
if you're talking about songs as being the mark of a great band, well, they're a great band without a question. Absolutely unbelievable song. But some of those songs I love so much, I would love to have seen them, jam on them. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, but his answer was that, well, we grew up in a time where songs were 3 minutes or under, and that's kind of like stuck with us. So
It's funny too because when you do see them live, they do jam those out, and I'm really looking forward to that Fillmore box set if that ever does sort of come to pass, which it sounds like it might at some point, just to see if there is any sort of extended jams on there because they do that fairly routinely where they'll put in an extra 16 bars and let Mike go to town or whatever. And
right.
The Allman Brothers, I mean, their Fillmore album, that's exactly what that was just a jam album, right? Really, I think one of the entries like 15 minutes or something. So you'd love to get some of those, and I think that. Because they did it with Breakdown, they would quite often Breakdown would be 7 minutes, 9 minutes, whatever it would be. And Dog on the Run on those early shows, which they just kind of dropped without a trace, was a long song as well. But I think maybe it is that thing of, especially once you've gone through Damn the Torpedoes, Hard Promises, Long After Dark, now you've got this catalogue of really big hits where you're drawing in a crowd that aren't just hardcore Heartbreakers fans, they're also radio fans who are going to come and they kind of want to hear all the songs. And then you start getting out of the situation, well, now we've got to pack in 2022 songs. We can't spend 15 minutes playing Melinda anymore, right? So
we don't have time. We don't have time to jam on them. Right? Yeah. That was, and you know what? And that was a interesting philosophy he had. He really always felt very attuned to the fact that it was costing people a lot of money to come, and so he wanted it wasn't way too many musicians have well, I don't care what the fans want. I'm going to do what I want kind of attitude. And that was not Tom. Tom was very attuned to, I want to give him a good show. I want to, show a lot of respect to him
Yeah.
and make him happy. So, so that, and, I can't say that about Dylan anymore.
Well, Bob's always been a little bit of a, bit of a loose cannon, right? And I think in the last 20 years, he's like, people are going to come. I don't care. So I'm going to go out there. I'm going to play what I want in whatever key I want. And I might change some of the words and people are just going to have to keep up. So.
Well, Jeff Slate, who you've had on your show,
Mhm.
he told me that he goes, Bob's doing exactly what he was doing in the 60s.
Yeah.
They wanted him to be a folk guy, and he goes, no, I'm going to play electric. So he goes, he's not doing anything different. He's
Yeah.
just doing whatever he wants to do, right? So, that's that, and that's
Absolutely.
his philosophy. And you can't argue with it because it's his life and that's what he wants to do. So,
And it is slightly different when it's someone like Dylan. And I think Tom probably could have got away with it because he's in that same mold that people will forgive a little bit of, sort of not egoism, but sort of a little bit about it. But I want to do this, and it's like the old adage when you go to see a rock concert, especially like an aging rocker, it's like, don't just play the greatest hits. We don't want to hear the new cuts off the album. But the Heartbreakers were different in that regard because I think that, and I've talked about this lots with people, because of Tom's diligence to making great music all the time and that sort of bloody minded focus on every song needs to be as good as or better than the last one recorded that he had, the quality of the albums never dropped off. So you did want to hear some of the stuff off Mojo. You did want to hear some of the stuff off Hypnotic Eye. You did want to hear stuff from Last DJ and Echo. And sometimes, like, your favorite song might be one of those deep cuts off one of those albums that they're probably not going to play live. So I think he's one of those rare artists who, even though on the 40th anniversary tour, most artists at that age, Kiss, Zeppelin, The Who, any of these guys, they're just churning out all the hits. Tom still had this catalog that he could dip into and throw one or two of those tracks in there,
Well, and he had a new album,
Yeah.
So that was the other thing. He's always putting out new music, and what's amazing is to look at the consistency of the music over his life. It's just unbelievable, unbelievable. I still can't get over Mojo.
It's
I can't get over it. It was turn on the recorder. Okay, we're all going to play at the same time. Done. It's like
in their practice space.
in their practice space.
At
right?
a time when blues rock isn't popular, so
Who does that?
yeah.
Now everybody's sitting there, okay, well, I got to record a voice track and a click track and and then they build it up, the Jeff Lynne style. That's how they're all, and to do it like a live band, just, and then to listen to it and go, oh my God. And I remember he made a comment that every one of these guys is a virtuoso.
Yeah.
And they were just amazing to be that good.
Yeah. Well, I was talking to Jeff Slate about that, and he said that because he's friends with Ben Mont, and he says Ben Mont's the only sort of 60, 70-year-old professional musician who still practices all the time. And I think it is just that dedication to the craft, right? We need to, and it's the same thing back in the day. No girls on the bus because it's the music first. Once we've done the show, once we've done the tour, go do whatever you want to do. But while the tour's going on, this is our job. And it's like you said, the fans have paid to come and see us. We need to take this seriously, and we need to put in absolutely top effort every time we get in. Okay, so yeah, I mean, obviously the big thing we want to talk about is the Tom Petty weekend, which is coming up. And that is on October 20th. And that's going to be at the Heartwood Soundstage in Gainesville. So the first question I had was, I know that the Tom Petty Birthday Bash 2018-2019 was held in Depot Park. And I don't know, were you involved in organizing those ones as well?
Well, okay. So October 20th, 21st, and 22nd, first of all. So it's 3 days.
Sorry, yeah.
And it actually started in 2017 when Tom passed away. 18 days later, we put together a 1 day, I don't want to call it a festival, although it was a little bit of a festival. But looking back at it, it was a wake for the people of Gainesville, right? And we had more. It was free, and we had, I don't know, 3,000 people there, and everybody was just emotional. People were crying.
Of course, yeah.
It was really powerful. So then we then we literally immediately started planning, went, wow, 3,000 people, holy smokes. And with almost no advertising, no notice, nothing, 3,000 people show up. It's like,
Yeah.
wow, I guess we should do this again.
Yeah.
And so we started planning to 2018, and the lead singer for the main band that played, he's got a tribute band, Tom Petty tribute band.
Okay.
The lead singer, he decided, we had put him in charge of picking out the bands for 2018, and then we also asked him to. We started going, well, what if 5,000 people show up the next time with adequate advertising and all that stuff?
Right.
So we're like, well, maybe we should look at a backup place to have this, because 3,000 is pretty much our max.
Yeah.
And so, well, there's Depot Park right across the street. Our place borders on Depot Avenue, which used to be called Depot Street, which
Right.
is the name of Tom's first single with
Yep.
a Mudcrutch. And so he went over there, and the next thing we know, he's decided to leave our group and do his own thing,
Okay.
and his own Tom Petty festival at the same time across the street. And
Okay.
so we had to deal with that for 18 and 19, and then in 20 it was COVID, and they did the family did a virtual festival. In 21, COVID was bad, and then in 22 the family was going to do a festival in Gainesville, and then it was when they decided, it was probably like February or March, and COVID was still raging, and so they were like, and so then we worked for 2 or 3 months to get their permission to hold another Tom Petty weekend. So we did it in 17, 18, and 19, and then now 22. And we would have preferred to have done it as one group.
Yeah.
The
Of
other
course.
group didn't want to do it that way. So
Yeah, it's too bad, really. But I mean, and I don't like to dwell on negatives. So at least it shows that there's such an appetite for Tom's music that you can run two simultaneously, or there's enough capacity that people want to hear that music. I think that's the positive takeaway from it, I think, right? So
I mean, in an ideal world, I don't think we could do the fest model, but the fest
right,
model is really interesting, that they might have a couple main stages, but basically every bar in town has a band that comes and plays, and
right,
you buy one ticket and you can go to any place you want to and see whatever you want. And but my goal was that we're celebrating Tom throughout town. And yes, every bar should have a, singer songwriter singing Tom's songs, and
yeah.
like everywhere you go, you can hear Tom
That'd
Petty
be
music, right?
so cool.
Wouldn't that be
Yeah,
cool?
that'd be
That
so
and
cool.
so yeah, and so I mean, literally, we could really have quite a tourism industry if we got behind it. And but you can't get there from, that's A to Z. You got to go through all those other letters
Of
first.
course.
So
Yeah.
and so that's where we're at with that, just trying to get this thing, and COVID really kind of knocked the wind out of us. And the other thing was, when Tom passed away, their management got frozen. They had to wait for the settlement of the way the
Of
estate was
course.
all get laid out, who was in charge, and that took a couple of years. And then they had to kind of like feel their oats, and and so now they're much more involved in I think, not involved, that's the right word. They're much more paying attention to what's going on.
Yeah.
And whether or not they're going to have another festival, I don't know. But there's a lot of background stuff that is unfortunate. Yeah, hopefully it'll all work out.
Of course, of course. I mean, and again, like I said, I always try to focus on positives on my podcast because Tom was, he shone so much light into people's lives that's the angle I try to take. So with the festival, let's not call it the Tom Petty weekend, then the festival. How big of a job is that logistically to pull all that together when you're bringing in so many different artists? Like you said, you're making sure that I'm sure you have to get like hotels, you have to do all these different things, checking with the city so you've not got a conflict with other events. Like, how much effort is that, and what kind of team do you have doing that work?
Well, there's three of us. Ho Chitama, who is the main owner of Heartwood Soundstage.
Okay.
Dave Malosh is the general manager of Heartwood Soundstage, and then I'm the producer of Tom Petty Weekend. But I think of it as a three-headed, animal. There, I couldn't do it without them, and they couldn't do it without me. In the sense that they both have other things to do, and I'm retired, so I can do more of this stuff. But it's a quite. I have remarked to folks that without the phone and a smartphone and a laptop and an iPad, I don't know. See how it would have taken a crew of 10 to 15 people to do what just I did by
Yeah,
myself. That because of the modern communications, there's a lot of stuff you can be a lot more efficient in running stuff. Right?
absolutely. Yeah, and it opens up these kinds of possibilities, right? I mean, and again, I think that's one thing that COVID did was a positive is that people have sort of got used to this medium of communicating now. Like, it's nothing to jump on a Zoom call and have a quick chat with someone halfway around the world, and that's become more normalized now. Where in the old days, I think it would have been or the old days, but before that, it would have been a little bit less common and maybe just a little bit harder to factor through that. And of
We could
course,
have talked on the phone, but we
you could have
wouldn't have
talked
known what each other looked like.
exactly,
Right.
and it's just
Yeah.
different. You communicate differently if you can see someone's face, right?
Right. Oh, yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, looking down the lineup you got for this year is pretty damned impressive too. And I mean, I'm a huge fan of Jake Thistle. I think that kid's, assuming that he gets the right opportunities and the right people get into his professional life, I think that guy can really go to the top. You got Paul Zolo, Jeff Slate coming down, and both excellent musicians in their own right. And obviously, Tom Terry authorities. Keith Eveland, lovely to see him coming down from the Nation, right, and doing a bit of a turn. And I don't know a lot of those other bands, so when you're pulling that together and you're looking at that set list, how do you approach, like, who do we ask? How do we get these people in? What was that process like? How did you sort of decide who you wanted to play?
Well, we so we were asking bands before we knew we could do it. So
Yeah.
we didn't want to pick out people that we didn't know. So we tended to
Okay.
go back to the well and go, hey, could you pencil in this date? We
Yeah.
don't have any money right now. We can't put, we're trying to work it out, just have patience with us. And so a number of them did. And so we're real happy with that. We've got some great acts. Oh my gosh. The one that could end up killing, I mean, like, oh my gosh, is the last band you'd ever expect. This is a band of 5 horn players and a drummer,
Okay.
right? And one's a trumpet, no, 2 trumpets, a sax, a clarinet, and a Sousa. Now Sousa's like the big tubas.
Wow. Yeah.
And these are all college kids, and they're all, while they're playing, they're literally jumping up and down. Now, there's this little 5'6" girl holding this giant tuba, and she's jumping up and down while they're playing, and they play with so much energy. You remember the Beatles' early songs? Well, they're playing with that kind of energy,
Wow.
and they're going to be playing, and they've never played Tom Petty songs, but we're going to get them to play some Tom Petty songs, and the first time I saw them was earlier in the year, and we had nothing but great bands come up one after another, and the whole band, everybody's like, oh, okay, yeah, and they're sitting there, not making a big deal about it, but these guys came up, no one had heard them before, and in no time, the entire crowd rushed the stage, and it's
Yeah.
like, who are these people? How can they put out this kind of energy? And so that's one band, the Sousa.
Okay. I'll check those guys out.
We have Shine and the Shakers, I think.
Okay.
And Shine is, holy smokes. Jimi Hendrix is she's came back as a black lady. That's all I can tell you. It's this lady, it's unbelievable. And
Okay.
she does some great Tom Petty songs, but she did you've heard the Jimi Hendrix song, Hey Joe.
Of course. Yeah.
She did it slowed down, and it was like, oh, like
Wow.
like a revelation, kind of like if Jimmy heard it, he'd go, oh man, I'm gonna start playing it that way.
That's
And
super cool.
so
Yeah, I'll definitely bookmark those and then try and dig into those. I think what I might actually do is when I put this episode out, I'll put a playlist together of all the bands just so people can hear, what they're getting into. So that's super. Yeah, like horns and and the drum, like that's crazy. And
One drummer,
these are young kids
no
then, like
bass
they're
player, no, they don't
wow.
sing. They just play, and the energy is amazing. And so yeah, we've got some absolutely amazing musicians. Everybody just really loves Tom, and they're willing to do whatever to come and honor him. And so that we're just really, we just all feel privileged to be part of it. It's just it's he was an amazing musician,
Yeah.
amazing person. And, I always point towards every time I see an interview he's in. He goes, well, I'm just an old musician from Gainesville,
Yeah.
Florida. He always mentioned Gainesville. Uh, what what musician would mention what? I mean, I can't think of another musician that would always mention where they were
Where they're
from,
from. Yeah.
right? And then he'd mention it in his songs. You
Yeah.
know, the references to the area is strewn around us. So much so that in 19, when they were doing a follow-up to the festival, one of the fans said, I like coming here because it's like being on a movie set. Oh, there's Lillian's music store. Oh, there's
Yeah.
441. Oh, there's his house. And it's all this stuff. So they it's pretty cool to be here. Pretty uh, magical, I guess. Uh, People probably, that are watching this are going to go, well, okay, so what's going to happen at a festival like that? I mean, Tom's gone, right? So how are you going to pay homage to him? And so one of the things we found out is that Tom wrote some magnificent songs, magnificent. And how do we know that is that when other people play them through who they are,
Yeah.
because everybody's different, right? And and also through the style of music that they play, it the songs pop anyway.
Yeah.
And if anything, they take on a new life. And so literally we've had fans just blown away by other people's interpretations of songs, of Tom's songs. And we've had people tell us, they go, I didn't come here all the way from California to hear local bands play their local songs,
Yeah.
their original songs. I came here to hear Tom Petty music. But they didn't, as we figured out, they didn't come there to hear Tom Petty sing Tom Petty music
Of
because you
course.
can't do that. But his songs reinterpreted by people bring a new joy to the fans. I mean, they just get ecstatic. I mean, so it it's so cool to hear.
Yeah.
You'd think, oh God, I get tired of Tom's songs after 4 hours or something, or 8 hours, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But no, it's because everybody brings a different perspective, a different sense of it. And it's like it's familiar and it once new. So it's just really interesting phenomena to hear these bands cover his songs. And one has to remember that Tom, maybe out of any professional musician that made it, probably covered more songs than any of them, than
Yeah.
anybody else you can think of. I mean, I know I saw somewhere that he had it covered at least 300 songs, right? Well, and it's so funny because when he was growing up, when he was playing, and I just talked to a guy that was helping book stuff, and the fellow said, "Yeah, I booked them at this Holiday Inn in Lake City, which is about 30 miles north." And the guy called up and was complaining because, they don't want to play the hits. They want to play their own songs.
Yeah.
And so and so Tom would develop a technique where he'd go, "Okay, we're gonna hear a new song from the band," and then he'd play one of his songs. And he would do that. He would introduce them as some, oh yeah, that famous band, well, here's another one of their songs, and he would play one of his, one of
So
his
good.
originals.
So
Yeah,
clever, right? Yeah.
but he got into so much trouble playing covers, not wanting to play cover songs, and then he ends up being like the cover song artist, you know,
Well, yeah, I
of
mean, and
of all time.
some of the covers he's done are they're almost the definitive, like Jagger and Thunderbird. Now, right? That's the version I want to hear. I want to hear Tom Petty singing that song because it's
Right.
so flipping cool, right? And again, like you said, with artists coming in and not, I don't, I think it's almost sort of, not worse isn't the right word, but I don't want to hear someone necessarily do Tom Petty's music verbatim because it's not him and you can't sing it exactly the same as him. So I love it when, again, people like Jake Thistle, I keep banging on that drum, but when I interviewed him for the podcast, I put together a shortcut of all the songs because he played 7 songs for us he did a live stream on YouTube. And when I posted that little clip of those 7 songs, I called it Jake Thistle Interpretations because that's exactly what it is. It's an artist finding the connection to those songs for themselves and expressing that. And I think it exposes the genius of Tom as a songwriter in that he was able to write these songs that maybe were sometimes specific to something he was feeling or going through at the time, but are broad enough and general enough that people can take those and say, well, this is how that applies to me, and this is how I can communicate that. And that's what music should be, I think, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And not everybody's songs work that well being played by others. I
No,
mean,
definitely
so it's very interesting and so interesting that he covered a lot of songs and then
Yeah.
he's now being covered,
Yeah.
so and like they did a cover of a band called of a song called Something in the Air.
Oh yeah,
which
yeah.
which
Thunderclap Newman. Yeah.
that's the thing about his covers is sometimes you can't even tell it's not the cover artist. It's
Yes.
not the artist that he's covering. It's like, God, who is that? It sounds so much like Thunderclap Newman. Wait, who is that? Well, that sounds like Tom Petty singing. It's like,
Yeah.
they did such amazing covers. Probably the best cover band ever.
I would make that argument with anyone any day of the week for sure. And you think about all the major artists, Dylan covered, different bits and pieces. Springsteen will throw the odd one in there, but no one owned them quite the same way that the Heartbreakers did. No one sort of got into the very bones of those songs and passed them off as their own almost, right? And I don't think anyone else has ever done that. Not at that level. Not a band at that level anyway.
I mean, they certainly could have made a career of doing that, but they didn't. They made a career of doing their own songs, but they added this as like, extras.
Yeah.
And so it's pretty cool in that way.
You just think about how many songs they probably know. When the Heartbreakers together, they, like you said, 300 covers, but they could probably play at the drop of a hat 500 songs, which is great. It's insane. That's absolutely insane.
Well, I don't know if you remember when they were recording Wildflowers. Yeah, they were recording Wildflowers, and the label said, "Hey, we're going to put out this greatest hits album.
Yep.
We need a couple songs." And so he whipped out Mary Jane's Last Dance.
It's just, yeah. I've got this one. I've got this one laying around. We could try this one maybe.
Oh, you need a greatest hits? Okay, yeah, I got that right. But then they went to, crazy enough, they pulled all their equipment out and rented a different studio.
Yeah.
And they decided to record covers. And in a day or two, they recorded 50. 50. Now, we're not just talking like lazy covers. We're talking
full
about
arrangement.
Full arrangement, the whole bit, right? So
let's wrap up. First of all, let me say thank you so much for your time. And I know I've probably taken up a little bit more than we were expecting, but this always happens when I talk to Tom Petty fans because Tom Petty fans love talking about Tom Petty, as do I. So it always kind of drifts off into these long conversations. But so for people who still want to get tickets to the Tom Petty weekend coming up in October, where do they get them? What's available? What are the options that they have?
heartwoodsoundstage.com. And then you go to upcoming events and scroll down to October 20th, 21st, and 22nd. It's a free concert. We did sell some VIP tickets, but we've sold those out. And we're approaching 1,500 people planning to come.
Wow.
And we fully expect to be completely sold out and have somewhere around 2,500 people each night. So
that's beautiful. And so is any portion of that going to be recorded and sort of put out later? And is there merchandise that people can get if they can't attend? Or is any of those kinds of options? Or
no, the family has asked us not to sell merchandise on the internet, right? That has Tom Petty name on it, right? So they have that right. We have no problem with that. And there is what was the first part of that question?
Is there any plans to record any of it to publish on YouTube or anything like that later as sort of highlights or?
Well, we recorded all of 2019 except for the last act that we missed their vocals,
Okay.
but we never put it out because it costs money to edit them down and remix them because
Right.
we've saved all the channels so we can mix it live, so to speak, but it takes time, and there's no necessarily a way of making money off of it.
Okay.
So so it's like, okay, do I just want to dump some money into editing these videos that people like seeing, but I'm money's
Yeah.
valuable.
Yeah.
So we will record it. I'm sure we'll probably put out a couple songs, for sure,
Okay.
that use it to help promote the next year. So let me tell you one other thing that we're doing, is we're doing a 3-hour storytelling session. And we've got folks like Jake Thistle, who, while he hadn't met Tom, he's spent a decent amount of time with a number of the Heartbreakers.
Yep.
And so he's got some stories from them. We've got Paul Zolo, who's going to tell some stories. He only spent a year, every weekend with Tom.
Yeah.
And Jeff Slate's going to tell some great stories. We have Nancy Luca. Nancy Luca is one of the, now she was she in the 70s, she was a guitar slinging goddess in Gainesville. She was,
Okay.
she took lessons from Mike Campbell when she was young,
Oh, cool.
and went out to California to make her fame and fortune, and that's where she lives now. And she's been in a number of bands, and she's amazing lead guitar player.
Okay.
And she's got some. I asked her, I said, "Do you have any stories to tell about Tom?" And she goes, "Well, there's that one where I was naked in his bed in a hotel room." She goes, "Do you want me to tell that one?" I said, "Nancy, you can tell whatever story you want." So I think she was kidding, though.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how to take that one. So it's like, okay.
There's
And
probably a lot of context needed for that story.
yeah. Right. And let's see here. We have offhand, I can't think of the others, but we have some terrific storytellers. It's going to be great. And then we're going to maybe a couple hours of storytelling and a panel discussion with the same folks that told stories,
Yeah.
led by Paul. So I guarantee you people that come to that are going to be ecstatic. Now we're actually sold out inside, but we're going to video and audio, and take the video and audio and put it outside on a big screen so that you can see it whether you're inside or outside. So
yeah. No, it's going to be. I mean, I was talking to someone else, and I think when I messaged you, I'm very, very disappointed that finances don't allow me to come down this year, but I'm really planning. I'm hoping that moving forward, that at some point I'll get a chance. And so that's the last question I kind of had before we wrap up: is what are the plans for the future with the Tom Petty weekend? Is this something that you're already starting to think about 2023 now? What's your sort of roadmap forward with this?
Well, we do this on the with the approval of the family.
Yeah.
Right? And the family was talking there seriously about taking over the festival and running it each year. And they had a whole, in 2021, they had a lineup of including Sheryl Crow.
Right.
And then they canceled it because of COVID getting bad. And so if they run it, it's going to be amazing. It's going to be different than what we do, but it's going to be amazing. But so we can't really plan unless we know that they're saying, "Oh, we're not going to do it this year. You can do it." So
okay,
when we finish this, that'll be the first thing we're going to be contacting with. Okay, so who's doing it next year? And so that's why we can't really, it's not really ours to plan.
Right.
And as I said to people, I have no problem with the fact that they own the copyrights and the trademarks, and it's their festival. If they want it, it's here it is. It's not ours. We're just caretakers, and and trying to do our best. We can't run it like they could. I mean,
of course.
They can. Hey, Bruce Springsteen, you want to come over and play at our festival? Hey, and can you imagine the Heartbreakers getting back together and then bringing
Oh,
in Stevie Nicks and
I
Eddie
know.
Vedder and all these people and Jake Thistle
Yeah,
to sing, to do a concert for Tom. Can you imagine?
it would be amazing, and it would definitely work. I mean, I remember, the Freddie Mercury tribute concert at Wembley. It shows that you can do it if you get the right people in. So
Right.
I think that would be
Well,
fantastic.
and I
And
also
hopefully, I mean, moving forward, even if that does happen and the festival grows and it becomes a bigger thing in Gainesville, hopefully there's still something that they can bring. Let the Heartwood Soundstage be a part of that in some capacity, because there's still a good opportunity for bringing in some of those smaller acts and getting them playing the music as well on the side. That can be, like I said, more of a jazz fest kind of the idea behind it. So
if we had our druthers, and it's not ours to choose, but if we had, we would. Oh, and our plan was to hold local and regional acts. It'd be like one of a number of stages, and
yeah,
we would have the local and regional acts. We would have the storytelling, and we would be the home for the Tom Petty Nation. Um,
nice.
so that they could go back and forth because it's just across the street. It's not a big deal. And so, in an ideal world, that's what would happen. But not always does things work out that way. So, but we think it's really important to have a festival each year for Tom. And I personally have a bigger picture. We I read this article about Liverpool in 2017.
Okay.
They presented this in 2018, but in 2017 they looked at tourism, and they're like, we're getting a lot of tourism. Where is this tourism coming from? Why is it that we're getting all this tourism? Well, they figured out that they were getting $110 million of tourism each year from the Beatles,
Of course.
right? This
Yep.
is 60 years later, right?
That's
60 years later. So I'm going, wow, that's a lot of money. And I don't know if you know about Liverpool. Modern Liverpool is not at all like the Liverpool that the Beatles grew up in. Liverpool the Beatles grew up in was like the dirtbag of England. I mean, it was one of the worst places. I mean,
yep.
Mick Jagger said, what, when they heard about that there was this band out of Liverpool that got a record contract, and he's like, what good can come out of Liverpool? Right? That's the pits, right? Well, now Liverpool is like the shining example of cities in England. Young people are moving there, modern buildings,
Yep.
businesses are moving there, families are happy moving there, all this stuff. I mean, and their tourism is huge, right? Well, why can't we do that? We're not going to be able to do
You can.
110 billion, but
Yeah.
maybe we can do 20 or 25 million. And I see every year that we already have a tourism business going on with Tom Petty.
Yeah, of
People
course.
post on Tom Petty Nation, pictures of visiting the Tom Petty Park. I don't know if you know about that, the park that's like literally across the street from his
Yep.
house, right?
The
And
park and the mural and his house, and that there's a whole, and yeah, Lillian's, and there's all these places that when I come down to Gainesville eventually, that's what I want to see. Of course I do.
right,
Yeah.
if someone put it after one of the festivals, they said it's like coming down to a movie set,
Yeah.
right? Oh, there's that.
There's that thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And so anyway, that's in the bigger picture, I just think that pays a tremendous amount of respect to Tom, and it helps his town, right? That he grew up in. So that's my goal, is to make it to where the fans have a place to come to, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, are they really gonna be nostalgic about Malibu? It's like they can't even get in Malibu, right?
Yeah, who cares about Malibu? I want to get. That's the thing. When me and my wife are planning trips now, San Diego, Mexico, I kind of want to go to Gainesville. Oh, where's Gainesville? It's this little place in Florida. But there's a reason why I want to go down there. So,
Yeah. Well, then you come, and then she'd like, oh, I get it, why
yeah,
you came.
100%. And I should tell you too quickly that it's funny talking about Liverpool. I grew up 20 miles from Liverpool and 20 miles from Manchester, basically smack in the middle of those two cities. So I'm very familiar with what Liverpool was, because I grew up in the 70s with it
So
being
I haven't been there. So did I tell the truth by what I just said?
100%. Yeah, I mean, it was a very working class town. It was where a lot of the Irish immigrants came during the potato famine. So it was a very mixed sort of cultural place, but out of that sprang a very vibrant music scene. And then, of course, they opened up the Beatles Museum, which, if you ever do get over there, it's a fantastic exhibit. And they've got the cavern, is sort of obviously not what it was, but they've got that as a place you can go and visit and look at. It's just, they've done it right. They've done it, as you're saying, they've done it exactly right, where they're not milking it, but they're giving fans what they want to see. And of course all the foot
Fans are going to
traffic.
come anyway, right?
Of course
Fans are
they are.
going to
Of
come
course,
anyway.
of
So
course. Yeah,
why not
absolutely.
facilitate? And not in a way like you're ripping them off, but facilitate so that everybody's happy, right?
Yeah.
And so that's anyway, that's my goal is to get that, at least it's an idea that, I believe in. If you have a good idea, it's a kind of like striking a match on a bale of hay. You throw it on there and it doesn't start out, but sooner or later it'll just,
Yeah.
it turns into
Yeah.
something much bigger. And that's a good idea is like that. You don't you put it out there, and if it's the right time and place, it'll happen. And so
Well, and
it's a great idea to honor Tom.
and a great legacy, and I think one that he would be very proud of too, right? And I think that the fact that you're doing this as a volunteer is wonderful and very special. And so, from all the fans who can't make it to the Tom Petty weekend, and all the fans who are going to be lucky enough to be there, thank you so much for all the work that you guys have put in to doing this, because again, it means so much to so many people. And all the people who are the 2,500 people who are going to be at this weekend are going to leave with a lifetime of memories, and they're going to meet people who they've met through the Tom Petty Nation and people like Paul Zolo, and they're going to be able to talk to all these people. And it's going to be such a life-changing event for so many people, and people are going to bring their kids, and their kids are going to get into it, and it's such a great thing that you guys are doing. So thank you so much.
Well, and you're welcome. That touches on one of the more amazing things about Tom Petty music is that you can find. I was wearing a Tom Petty T-shirt to a PT appointment, and there was these two, and I'm old, but these people were much older. They were in their 80s or 90s, and they looked at me and they go, "Nice T-shirt. We love Tom Petty." I'm like, "Whoa," and I get that from 14-year-olds.
Of course.
Literally his music. I can't think of anybody beyond the Beatles that have quite the the fan base that he had in terms of age groups. Now, what's interesting is now when we have these festivals, do you know what age group and sex we see the most of?
I would say, if I had to guess, I would say 35 to 50-year-old women is what I would guess.
Probably closer to 50, 60-year-old women.
Is it really? Yeah.
Yeah, 45 to 60 or something like that.
Okay.
Women that were 16 when Tom came out, right? And they became infatuated with Tom and then stayed with him their whole life.
Yeah.
So and we were like, wow, there's all these middle-aged ladies around. This is really interesting. It was like, why is that? Well, Tom, that's who's Tom attracted. And they, we talked about that earlier. You when you're young, you decide you like a particular kind of music, and that tends to be the music you like the rest of your life. You might like others, you might add others, but you always
go back.
Yeah, it's your first love, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so that's apparently he had a lot of fans in the ladies back in the day. So. Oh, rock and roll live is just the greatest thing.
It's the best thing in the world.
Yeah. With an amazing band and being reasonably close. It's just, oh my gosh, it's just thrilling. It's hard to explain to someone if they haven't done it. And so